What's up, comic book fans? Pete here from Comic Books Transformed, where we talk about comics that have been adapted into streaming shows and movies. Um, Doctor Who is a franchise that has had many comics made. Recently, there's a Titan Comics owns the rights to Doctor Who, and so they've been putting out tons and tons of Doctor Who comics every year. I haven't read that many Doctor Who comics, but I still want to talk about Doctor Who with my good friend over there, Mike Bongiorno, who is the host of Pop Culture Man Children. Mike, welcome back.
Hello.
I think it's been a couple of recordings, and I haven't had you talk about Comic Books Transform. I'm sorry, that's the name of this channel. I haven't had you talk about Pop Culture Man Children in a while. Do you guys want to explain your channel real quick?
Yes. Pop Culture Man Children PCMC is a podcast. It's available anywhere podcasts are found, including YouTube. But as of now, there's no. You can just listen to it on YouTube. It is about pop culture, but our what makes us different, I think, from a lot of other podcasts is we practice non-toxic fandom.
Yes.
We're coming from a place of love. Not meaning that we're not critical. It's we think deeply about the things we talk about, but we're not here to hate on diversity and things like that.
Yes.
It's and we do episodes on everything from the most obscure Japanese comedies from the 80s to horror to comics to video games to listicles. We just did an episode on our top 10 favorite character actors.
Yeah.
Which is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It's something for everybody, I think.
Oh, absolutely. And sometimes the way that you run your show and what happens, I kind of wish that was sort of the way that both of my channels are. Like you kind of like a much more natural conversation, whereas I feel like I'm like, okay, we have certain talking points we have to hit. And also I think there's like this pressure when you're trying to cover stuff that is topical in the moment that like you're like, okay, well, we got to talk about this. But I think that your format that you have where you kind of pick and choose what you're going to talk about for the week, I think that lends itself to a much more like natural and flowing conversation.
Yeah, I do find there's freedom in not feeling the need to cover something that's brand new. I mean, I will once in a while, but like we'll go back and talk about like something from 30 years ago, whatever.
Right. Yeah, I know like one of the most recent ones that you did that was like about something recent was like the Ghostbusters movie, Ghostbusters Frozen Empire.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But it's cool to have you on here for Doctor Who, which is like, pretty popular thing right now, and like everyone is talking about it. Ironically, the two episodes that we're covering are like 2 to 3 weeks old at this point. Right? So it's like not the most cutting of all the Doctor Who episodes that are there. They just released The Legend of Ruby Sunday like 2 days ago, but we're talking about Dot and Bubble, and we're talking about Rogue. So out of those two episodes, which one did you like the most?
Dot and Bubble, I like the most.
Dot and Bubble. Okay.
I like Dot and Bubble a lot, although I don't have I do have criticisms of it.
Okay.
For sure, but I liked it.
Okay. Well, so Dot and Bubble, it's kind of funny because I watched my usual video, Who Culture, which is like the show that I go to every week before I record with you. And, they had a lot of things to say about this episode, what the episode was trying to say. And then, of course, they talked about this main character, Lindy Pepper Bean. Yeah. And I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on her. Like, she's a pretty unlikable character. Yeah. How do you feel about her?
Well, I want to say I think she's brilliantly played by Callie Cook. And I say it's brilliantly played because I hate her.
Yes.
She does a great job of making you really dislike this person. She has all the things. She's vapid, but has performative activism. She's ageist. She's got all sorts. She's just everything terrible.
Yeah.
She's the kind of person like if you go to like Starbucks or whatever, she's always in front of you online, like
Yeah.
make a deal about something.
You're right.
So she is an unlikable character. But I think the performance is very good. I like that because of the dot and bubble concept of it being like a social media platform that is projected around your whole head. We often see her in close up. She's an attractive person, so we often see her in close up, and so she's there's when you're that close to somebody, there's great subtlety that you just do with your eyes or your eyebrow or something, where you can get something across. So, but as for what it's about, I think it's trying to be about a lot of things,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's maybe the problem.
Yeah.
I personally think that I know that people don't want the point beat over your head, which I
Yes.
understand.
Yes.
I too like subtlety. I too like nuance. But at the same time, I feel like the problem with something like this is there's too many ideas working together and it doesn't totally fit. You know, in one scene, she's having performative activism where she's going, I don't she's talking about recycling and I don't want to waste any resources. But then the next scene, somebody's talking about something important and they go like boring. So it's like, what is it? Is this episode about ageism? Is this episode about social media? Is this episode about politics? Is it about echo chambers?
Yep.
Is it about even the dot and bubble? I was asking myself, is this Twitter? Is this YouTube? Is this podcasts? Is this Instagram? Because I think all of those things can't be conflated. I think they're different and work in different ways in our culture. So I feel like it was a bit of too many ideas. Whereas go back to the 2004 Russell T Davies episode, what was it called? The Long Game, which is from the first season from 2004. And this was it's basically a Fox News metaphor. It has Simon Pegg in it. I don't know if you remember way back then. Simon Pegg is in it, and basically the doctor, this was Christopher Eccleston, sees that humanity has stopped evolving socially, and he's like, what's keeping them from evolving? And he finds there's this channel that's broadcasting all of the media to all of the human galaxy, and they're filling them with propaganda and bullshit. And it's a very clear Fox News metaphor.
Sure.
Well, it's a similar idea that Russell T Davies is working through now, but the metaphor is muddled.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% on that. There's definitely a whole bunch of things that they are making a commentary on, including racism, which we'll talk about in a minute too, because I didn't necessarily pick up on that the first time around.
And I think that's okay, because I think it's more complicated than just racism.
Right. It's like a whole bunch of things in one. It definitely seems to be written by a person. I know it's written by Russell T Davies, the showrunner himself, but it seems to be written by a person who is very much fed up with just the way that people are these days. And it's interesting because like previous episodes in this series seem to deal with like being upset with one side of the aisle. And I know in Britain, there's like the Tories and the Labor Party versus like the Republicans and the Democrats. But this one seemed to be a sharper commentary on like people that say they are liberal and like feel good about themselves and feel like, okay, they're doing the right thing, but really there's no substance to them. And I have seen people say that it's about social media, but I've also seen people say that it's about the idea of the echo chamber. And of course, like you achieve an echo chamber through using social media. So I kind of see like both of those being valid points. But like I saw the danger of the echo chamber in this. I know there's other points besides it just being an echo chamber, but I saw like, okay, you're not willing to consider what's going on in the world around you. Now, I think that when they made this episode, I think that like what was going on in Israel, boy, this is a fucking juicy episode we recorded here, right? When they made this, I don't think that like the crisis in like Gaza and stuff probably was like on
It
their
wasn't like where it
minds.
is now. Yeah.
Right. But I think that like there being people dying right outside of your echo chamber and you don't want to acknowledge it or you're too scared to acknowledge it. You just kind of want to be plugged into your own world, your own perspective. I feel that like, it's just a very big coincidence right now because like if you go on social media right now, there's all these posts about, the same bullshit we always talk about, like, let's tie in Star Wars and like, oh, the Rise of Skywalker, Last Jedi, there's all that bullshit, right? Yeah. But then there's like, oh yeah, there's these people being slaughtered right over here. Are you guys acknowledging that? So even though there's
interesting. It's interesting that your mind went to that conflict because my mind, and I don't think you're wrong, I think you're right, because I think it's a lot of things, but my mind went somewhere else. For some reason, my mind went to the vaccine, the COVID vaccine.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Maybe it's because, it might be because at the very end, the way the doctor acts made me think of Anthony Fauci. Because at the end, the doctor's crying, going, please let me save you. Let me save you. You're going to die. And they're like, we hate you. And I maybe because recently there was that thing with Marjorie Taylor Greene who was yelling at him saying, you're not a doctor. I'm going to call you Mr. Fauci.
Yeah.
And it's like, how did this guy the echo chamber turn this guy into like fucking Skeletor? He's the worst villain that ever lived. He's just a fucking a boring ass doctor who, because there was a global pandemic, he got into the public eye in a way that he never was.
Right.
And they're like, you're the villain. You're the greatest villain of all time. And it's like, he just fucking helped. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah. All you're doing is asking people to wear masks and to be conscious of like your actions and what you're doing. They're like, fuck you, go back to Germany, you Nazi, right? So Jesus, we are covering so many fucking like kind of powder keg topics right here, but that's what the show has been doing this season. You even have said in our little messages that like you kind of feel like the show is like trolling certain people at this point. And I really like that you made that point about COVID and Fauci and stuff like that, because this idea for Dot and Bubble, I read somewhere that like Russell T Davies had this idea for years and years and years, and that he actually pitched it at one point, like in like 2009 or something like that, or 2011. So he's had this idea for a while, and I guess finally the technology was available to where they could film something like this with these bubbles around these people and make it look effective.
Yeah.
But I mean, clearly, regardless of what's happening in the world, always like the people in Fine Time that are like so into themselves and so absorbed that like they can't see this horror going on right outside of their bubble, right?
Right. Yeah.
I think that you're probably right. Like COVID, that's actually smarter. That's probably where the modern version of this episode was conceived, with this idea, because you literally are in a fucking bubble during COVID, right? Because you're just like virtual. Yeah. So let's talk about, because I really like the point that you made about how it's like about a lot of things. I didn't even realize that racism was one thing they were commenting on too. And then you said too that like you didn't realize on your first go through either, right?
Yeah. Yes. No, I didn't. Look, I don't want to deny that there is racism in there, because there is. Especially on my second go, I caught that there were no people of color in the bubble. I caught that there was microaggressions, like she doesn't notice it's the doctor shows up at the beginning and then he shows up later and she doesn't realize it's the same guy. She's like, oh, I thought you just looked the same. So there's all sorts of microaggressions. So I don't want to look like I'm ignorant to that statement. But I do think there's I think it's worth thinking about it from a sort of intersectional perspective. It's not just race, it's it's race, class, gender, preference. I think yes, because he's black, immediately Lindy clocks him as like, oh, this is a bad guy, I don't want to talk to him. But I think there's other things going on. There is class. You know, she sees him as sort of like a servant class.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
like the end, she says, "Thank you for saving us," but she says, "But it was your duty." You know, it's there's a lot going on. I mean, you can't talk about race really without talking about socioeconomic status and things like that.
Yes.
And I think it's interesting on the second go around. It is interesting that the doctor sends in Ruby, because Ruby, being young and white and attractive and female, I feel like that helps Lindy listen more, because she was never going to listen to the doctor.
Right. Right. Really good point. Yeah. Because like I said before, I didn't pick up on the racist vibe right away. And you're saying there's much more to it than just it being like racism. But that is one thing I did pick up on my initial viewing, was like, okay, she's not even getting the doctor the time of day. Like, he tries to talk to her, she just like brushes him off. She dismisses him immediately. But then Ruby, she like at least gives a chance to explain the situation.
Yeah.
And
It's a
so,
fascinating idea of the doctor, because that's what the doctor does. He saves people. To have maybe this is again what made me think of Fauci. It's an episode of Doctor Who where the people in peril are like, no, thank you to the doctor. And the doctor's doing what the doctor does. He's like, I'm going to save the day. And they're kind of like, no, we don't want you to save the day. Or we don't want to listen to you.
right.
It's also interesting because I think since we have our first black doctor, eventually we were going to have to deal with it in some way. And the more obvious way would have been to go back in time to a time where there was institutionalized racism and have them treat the doctor poorly. We saw that with, when Peter Capaldi he had a black companion, he went back. Same thing with Jodie Whittaker. She had a black companion. They had a Rosa Parks episode where they went back and the black companion was treated poorly because of the time period. I think this is an interesting way of dealing with, what could happen with a black doctor without it being that way, without it being a time travel thing.
Yeah, well, I'm actually really, really glad you brought that up, and that's making me kind of jump a little ahead in my notes. We're still talking about Dot and Bubble, but I wanted to address the next episode, Rogue, as well, because in Rogue, they keep making these references to Bridgerton. And I know that this, like, just going into this topic could get a little like, oh, we're walking on thin ice here. But, I've never watched Bridgerton, but I do know that they have like black actors, and essentially the characters that they portray are like of the same social status and stuff as white, but it's supposed to be of a time period where like they would be, not treated as well. They would be discounted by the color of their skin. They would be the servants in the episode. In Rogue, the doctor walks around, and there isn't a scene in Rogue where they're like, oh, how is this guy a lord? How did this guy get here? And so I wanted to ask you if racism against black people had been addressed in Doctor Who, because I couldn't really think of episodes that I had seen where it was even a point in the episode, but you just referenced a couple. And and then I was wondering, with the 15th Doctor, were they just going to make it a thing where that's not an issue, where like he just travels and people don't say, oh, what is this black guy doing here? I'm going to talk, because if you watch that episode Rogue, it's just a non-issue.
Right. Yeah, it is. It's interesting. I mean, like, to look, I have watched a little bit of Bridgerton. So I love that. I mean, I think like maybe the biggest, it's people have done that for a long time, but the biggest maybe touchstone of that is Hamilton.
Yes.
Which Jonathan Groff from Hamilton is in this episode.
Right.
And I like it. It's interesting. It allows for it's I've never been a huge proponent of realism. I've always said realism is just one stylistic choice among many. It doesn't it's not paramount to me.
Yeah.
So it allows you to have the best actor for the best role. It allows you to open it up to all sorts of different actors to try different things. But it does create problems, right? Because like nobody is noticing that the Doctor is black and that
Right.
he of a higher class. Yet when they need to make a scene, the Doctor says, "Let's you and me dance" to Jonathan Groff, and because we're two men, that'll make a scene. So it's like, all right, in this reality, no one's gonna notice that you're black and question it.
Right.
But they are gonna notice two men. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like so
I do.
it's interesting. And then like you even have a scene where the housekeeper is like outside and the woman running the party is like, "Oh my god, how could you be outside? You're trying to ruin me. I can't have anyone see my housekeeper." And it's like, okay, so it creates a problem.
Yeah.
But also there's something timey-wimey happening, right? Because they're playing Bad Guy by Billie Eilish.
Yeah. Yes.
And they're playing Poker Face by
Lady
on the
Gaga.
violin, Lady Gaga, right? So it's kind of like there's a lot going on here. Yeah.
Yes. Well, okay. But see, this is why I was really excited to talk to you because you are literally a film professor. What I was going to say was that there are terms for the type of realism that you use in a movie, right? Like there's like in a movie or a TV show, I guess maybe in a novel too, where it's like you are making it so realistic that it feels like a documentary. That's one type of movie, right? Well, isn't there a term for that where it's like so realistic? Any kind of music is just literally the music that's in the background of the scene, not like a score.
You could say verite.
Okay, cinema verite, right? For that, right?
That was a specific movement, but yeah, that's the kind of thing, yeah.
Right. And so what I was wondering about this with Doctor Who is that like in all the years that Doctor Who's been around, like have they for the most part tried to be historically accurate about things, even though there's fucking like robot men and like, aliens, like at least when it comes to like the human thing, like, oh, we are in, the time of Columbus. So, this is what it's going to be like. And, this is, ancient China. So it's going to be like this. Right. So I think that like, is this a departure from the show in general where, like you said, they have like Lady Gaga on the violins? Has it become a different type of show?
Interesting.
By doing this.
Perhaps. Yeah. I mean, I think that there's something this is a very meta, metatextual episode.
Yeah.
Because it's not, it says in the beginning that they're in what's the year?
1813, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But really they're in an episode of Bridgerton.
Right.
The very first thing Ruby says is this is like Bridgerton. And there's a scene where Ruby is watching two people argue, and she's like behind a stack of books watching, and she's like watching like she's watching an episode of Bridgerton. Yeah. So I think it sort of fits on the. You can forgive a lot of these stylistic choices if you think of it under the umbrella of this is a sort of meta episode. They're not in 1813; they're in Bridgerton. It's as if they went to the show.
Yes.
At least that's how I think about it. I mean, you could extend that in some ways, like how when you think about like the Beatles episode, we talked about how these guys don't look anything like the Beatles.
Right.
They do things that the Beatles don't do. It's almost like just a sort of idea of the Beatles than the actual Beatles. So I don't know.
Yeah. No. You that's a great point to bring up because the episode ends with this fucking musical montage, right? Where they're all just dancing in the street and stuff. So it becomes a musical. Yeah.
And there's a moment where the music comes on, the score comes on, and then you realize they hear it in the show, and the doctor says, "Oh, I thought that was non-diegetic."
Right.
So this is a very meta doctor. I mean, this doctor's got a little bit of Deadpool in him.
Oh, you stole my joke. I was about to make the Deadpool joke. No, it's good. I mean, I'm fucking digging this. I love how we're kind of talking about Doctor Who as a whole, I still want to talk about some things with Dot and Bubble, though, too. Like, the one thing I really wanted to talk about was the character of, like, Ricky September.
Yeah.
And, we'll get back to everything else that we're talking about. But before we lose Dot and Bubble, these despicable people that live in Fine Time, probably the scene that makes me hate Lindy the most is when she betrays this guy that she's like loved this whole episode. And I was not anticipating that. That was a bit of a shock when that happened. What about you?
Well, I thought, to me at least, I thought they were setting up Ricky September as a villain. Like he to me, I was like, oh, they did a red herring with him, because the minute he shows up and then he's like overly nice and he seems to know more than he should know. So I'm like, oh, this is going to be the next turn. Yeah. And then so I was doubly surprised when he really was just a nice person and she betrays him and lets him get killed in her place.
Yeah.
But I was clocking him. I was like, oh, this guy's going to be bad.
Right. As was I. And I mean, like, he had this great line too. If we're going back to like the commentaries, he was basically saying that like he just posts his stuff and then he's off of the bubble or Dot and Bubble. He's off his dot for the rest of the day, and then he just like reads books and has deep thoughts. And I mean, that's definitely the clear like social media commentary right there, because it's like you post something and then just come off of it, and that's probably the healthiest thing you can do.
Right. But don't you in some ways feel like there's even something performative about that type of person? Like, you've been at a party, right? You've been at a party and everyone's talking about something and they're like, oh, well, I don't really go on. I don't have Twitter. And you're like, all right, congratulations. Great. You're better than everybody here.
Right. Right.
Even that, but maybe again, it was because I wasn't trusting him. So I was kind of like, I was thinking about everything he did.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I've met those people many times over. One of the things that cracks me up on social media is there's a couple of authors that I follow, and like their little subtitle on their name is like for posts only, or like media posts or book promotion only. Like basically they're saying like they're on social media just for when they promote their books.
Right.
But then literally they comment on everything and they talk about every random thing, not just their books, and it's like, okay, you just put on a show basically. I mean, this whole episode is about people putting on a show, but then also like people just believing that show and not.
Yeah. Well, I think it's crazy that you say that. I'm sorry.
No. Please say what you're gonna say.
I would say it's crazy that you say that because that's what Rogue is about too. I think both of these two episodes are about people performing. It's about performativity. Rogue is they're pretending to be in Bridgerton, and the Chol 4, the aliens, they are literally taking over people's bodies and cosplaying.
Yes.
And Jonathan Groff, Rogue, he's pretending to be this tough guy, but he's this very like sweet D&D playing nerd who listens to Kylie Minogue music.
Yes.
So it's everybody's playing at something in that, and you made me think. Yes, in Dot and Bubble, everyone's also playing at something.
Yeah. I think that like Doctor Who, I can't speak to the behind the scenes that much, but I think they really do make a point to be like, okay, we need to cover what's topical. We need to kind of cover like the show wants to make a statement about what's going on in the world. And I think that like there being this like kind of lack of reality, or people just being disconnected from reality, is like a major thing that we deal with, as a society. Yeah. I'm sure in Britain they do as well. The last thing, because I want to go full Rogue with you in 1 minute. The last thing I want to say about Dot and Bubble. What's that?
I did a Rogue impression.
Oh, you went sugar. Okay. Yeah, nice. The last thing I want to do though is just talk about how scary and disturbing this episode is too, with like the slugs.
Yeah.
I just remember this one part when Lindy's in her office and she's forced to like turn off her bubble so she can look and see what's going on, and there's just the legs of a coworker just hanging out of a slug's mouth as he's being eaten.
Yeah.
That's really disturbing stuff.
it's disturbing, but it's a little funny too.
Oh,
I
of
think
course, of course.
there's a great irony to this episode.
Yeah,
Like, I love like there'll be like this beautiful bucolic thing going on, and then like at the very frame, like you see somebody like screaming, being dragged to their death. Like I
yeah,
kind of, and I love the juxtaposition of Bugs with this sort of beautiful manufactured curated world of like all these pastel colors and cream colors, and then like what's more, a symbol of like the ugly indifference of nature than like Bugs, right? You see that in David Lynch movies, you see that in David Cronenberg movies. Like nothing says like, oh, nature is ugly and horrible than like a bug. So it's like a bug in this beautiful little like IKEA world that they've created for themselves.
yes. Oh my God, such a good point. Such a good point. Because like the whole Fine Time world seems like the setup Instagram shots, those shots that are not real, that are
Yes,
just to,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. That's what Fine Time seems like. But then you have this sort of like grimy, gross slug situation. I was a
yeah.
little bit confused as to like what was going on with the slugs and what was going on with the dots. They are saying that basically the dots have like grown to hate the
Yeah.
people, but like were the dots working like with the slugs? Like I didn't understand that. What
No,
how did
yeah,
you take
that's
that?
very. They don't really ever go far enough into establishing what the menace is. The doctor
Yeah.
does have a joke about if they're going in alphabetical order, that means there's a method to it, and then it means they have access to your names. So the dot must be involved. So and they must have grown to hate you from watching it, which is very funny. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how could they manifest bugs. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I do find it funny that the bugs move so slowly. It shows how useless and dumb the citizens of Fine Time are. They just
Yeah.
have to like walk into their mouths.
Yeah.
Like it's
Yeah.
like it's a very easy menace to just walk around.
Yes, yes. Well, the people from Fine Time are so pathetic. Like Lindy can't even walk independently of her bubble. Like the
Yeah.
bubble has to tell her, walk straight, make a left.
It has
Yeah,
to tell
yeah.
her when her bladder is full because she won't know to pee without it.
Yeah,
It's
Dr.
crazy.
P. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Just really unlikable characters. And then, of course, we get that scene at the end where essentially they're going to go off into the woods that are surrounding Fine
And
Time.
die immediately, probably.
Yeah. Now, one of the things I don't want to take credit for this, but one of the things that they said on Who Culture was that the scene where they're like on that dock is actually the first scene where the Doctor and Ruby acted together, like Shuti Gatwa and
That's
yeah, the
amazing.
girl that plays Ruby. And so like, they don't necessarily click a lot on that scene. They don't really have to interact with each other that much in that scene either. But I think that like considering that's the first time that they acted together, Shuti Gatwa like really gives it his all as he's
Yeah,
pleading for them to not
yeah.
just uselessly kill themselves.
I think that they always have great chemistry.
Mhm.
I've grown to. I know at first you weren't sure how you felt about Millie Gibson's Ruby, but I've grown to absolutely love Ruby. We can talk more about that in Rogue because I think she's great in Rogue. But
Mhm.
it is amazing. I had no idea that they filmed in. I kind of thought. I mean, I know how production works. You don't film in an order. You film in whatever order makes sense for the production. But it seems to me that they're filming multiple episodes at a time. I thought that they at least did an episode at a time.
Yes,
So it's
yes.
wild. Also, Millie Gibson's first moment playing Ruby was the shot in 73 yards where she's like got the old person makeup and she's like looking out her window and like drinking a cup of tea. Like that's the first time she's playing Ruby. And she's not even playing regular Ruby. She's playing Ruby like 30 years older. So
That is
it's
fucking
wild.
wild.
It's
Yeah,
hard to
yeah. Well, it's interesting too because I didn't realize that Shuti Gatwa was also on another show called I think it's like Sex Education or
yes, yeah.
and so apparently like when they were filming this, they would have to have episodes or gaps where the doctor's not around. Now in this season, by the
Maybe
time
also
I've done
Barbie too.
what's that?
He's in Barbie, so it's possible that maybe they made time for him to do Barbie as well.
Oh, probably. Yeah, yeah. But I was gonna say that like we're 5 episodes in, and this is like 2 episodes in a row when you do the one with Ruby and her other self kind of following her around, like 73 yards, right? Is that one?
Yeah.
Right. So 73 yards, and then this one, they're both pretty Doctor Light, for
Yeah.
this season. And we're only 5 episodes in. But yeah, that kind of covers Dot and Bubble. I know we kind of jumped around to Rogue too, but now we can dive into Rogue. So like you've mentioned
Just like
Jonathan.
Magneto, we can dive into Rogue.
Oh my god.
Happy Father's Day, everybody.
That is perfect for this channel, man. That's fucking perfect. But I was gonna say, like, you've mentioned Jonathan Groff a handful of times. I actually think that Jonathan Groff is a national treasure. I think I've asked you this, but you have seen Mindhunter or you have not?
No, I haven't.
Okay. So Jonathan Groff is the main character in Mindhunter. He's like one of the two main leads. And he is just fantastic in Mindhunter. I loved him in Hamilton, even though he's got the king role and it's very reduced. But then I even like him in Matrix Resurrections. Did you see that?
Yes,
Yeah.
I like that movie. I actually did like that movie.
Yeah,
and I liked him in Knock on the Cabin. Have you seen that? The M. Night Shyamalan movie?
I started it. I didn't finish it. I read the book it's based on. Yeah,
it's an M. Night Shyamalan movie, so it's of course not great. But I thought he was very good in it. He's great. No, I love him. He's one of the voices in Frozen. He's a national treasure. Yeah.
And so I remember seeing the trailer for this episode, and I was like, wait a minute, is that Jonathan Groff? He's going to be in this episode? And then when they show him, I think that's when they're playing Bad Romance by Lady Gaga, right? Or Bad Guy, right? By Billie Eilish.
Bad Guy by Billie Eilish, yeah.
That's when he first shows up. Okay.
Yeah.
And so what I wanted to talk about with that was the idea of the Doctor and romance, because you know way more about Doctor Who than I do. And at least in the Doctor Who that I've seen, I know that obviously he gets married to River Song at one point, but the Doctor, regardless of his incarnation, always kind of seems like he doesn't have time for romance, or like he's almost like kind of like one of those prudish guys that like if a girl flirts with him, he kind of like tries to change the subject. That's what I've gotten from the Doctor, and I've not seen the Doctor as a woman. So, in your experience, how does the Doctor encounter romance?
Well, for a very long time, it was an unwritten rule. Actually, it was a rule. In the early show, the BBC had I don't know if it was a written rule or unwritten rule, but they had a rule that the Doctor could not like even really like touch the female companion, because they wanted no anybody to assume anything like that's happening. So the Doctor is very asexual in the original series. Then, of course, when it comes back, the Doctor's got a romance with Rose. And then Martha likes him, but he doesn't like her. The Doctor ends up then, like, just through some way or another, always kisses the companion. Like Matt Smith was a very sort of like, he was very prudish, kind of played that way, like an old kind of fuddy-duddy.
Right.
And he his companion kissed him. He also kissed Rory at one point. So now it's much more loose. Probably the closest we've had since Rose and David Tennant was the 13th Doctor, Jodie Whittaker's character. She had a romance with the female companion Yaz. So it's funny, twice in a row you have a Doctor that's having basically like a same gender romance.
Okay.
But the thing is, they never kissed.
Yeah.
And there's some controversy around that because a lot of people saw it as queer baiting, which is, I don't know if you're viewers are aware of queer baiting or not, but it's the idea that a producer or writer teases a subtext of LGBTQIA romance, but never really pulls the trigger and does it. So they get the eyes of queer audience members, and they get their excitement, but they also never have to deal with the fallout of doing it or deal with the trouble that would come from maybe their censors for doing it.
Right.
So a lot of people were upset that Jodie Whittaker never kissed Yaz. It seems like we've said this before. Russell T Davies is he don't give a fuck anymore.
Yeah.
Even in the last episode, Dot Belbo, he's like he clearly says he's attracted to Ricky September.
Right.
So this doctor is. Well, you got to think of also, like, remember, like, he split from David Tennant, so he's the doctor, but without any of that all of that PTSD from the Time War and all that. Now he's just like happy-go-lucky doctor, but he's also very emotional. We've talked about how he cries in every episode.
Yes. This episode included. Yeah.
Yes, he cries in both the episodes we're talking about.
Yeah.
He's a big crier. So we're really in a different era now. The doctor, I mean, it's not subtext at all. From the minute they meet, they're flirting with each other, which I think a lot of the fun of this episode. And then they dance and it's nice. And then Jonathan Groff, like, fake but kind of real, proposes to the doctor.
Yes.
And then they kiss. They have a real kiss, which is like good for them. And he says when he sort of sacrifices himself, he says, "Find me."
Yes.
And I think we will see more of him. I think he'll be like River Song or Captain Jack Harkness. I think he'll be one of those, like, sometime companions.
Yes, I 1,000% agree with you on that. And I think that, like, when I've seen people talk about this episode, they'll say, like, okay, well, you already had Captain Jack Harkness. Like, this isn't, like, new to Doctor Who. This isn't as controversial as you think.
Because Captain Jack did kiss David Tennant.
Right. I was just about to say that. Right. And, there's a whole spinoff with Torchwood and stuff like that. But to me, the flirting becomes so strong and stuff when he's on the ship and he's controlling Rogue's ship with the sonic screwdriver. And there's that Kylie Minogue song that you already referenced there. But, like, it just kind of keeps going where he keeps playing the song and he keeps dancing very passionately to the song. And I think it's a really charming scene, and it's really great flirting between the two of them. And it kind of helps break down that wall that Rogue has put up.
Yes.
But I do see what you're saying about the queer baiting, and I feel like that is something that, it's funny because this is owned by Disney now at this point too. I feel like Disney kind of does that. They definitely have done that with Star Wars, where they're like, oh yeah, there's lesbians in this, but then it's just like literally like a scene where people kiss for a second and then that's
like you gotta look in the back. Or like, another egregious one was when they did their live action remake of Beauty and the Beast. They were like, LeFou, the little lackey of Gaston, like, he's gay in this one. And it's like, because one scene he dances with a guy, like, fucking come on.
And he barely dances with the guy too. It's like he just kind of turns to him and smiles. Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. Right. Yeah. So I mean, like, I just love that you've seen so much of Doctor Who that you can actually give, an official breakdown of what's happened with the other doctors. I like the romance in this. I feel like it's like real quick and sudden, but I think that, like, this doctor just must have a type, and he, like, Rogue must, like, push the buttons for him, and it's almost like a love at first sight thing. And when he's gone at the end, the doctor is truly sad. I actually really love when, after Rogue has fallen with the rest of the Children, or whatever they're called, he has the ring that Rogue proposed to him with, and he puts it on. And I didn't even realize that Ncuti Gatwa has a bunch of rings on his hands to begin with.
And little tattoos and stuff.
Yes, like on his nails, right? Like on his nails. He's got these Yeah, and so like, I like that essentially it's just like another ring added to his look. And like I think we might have even talked about this in previous recordings, but some people have said that there isn't like a definitive 15th Doctor outfit because he's like just constantly wearing different outfits every episode. But maybe the rings are like the definitive 15th Doctor.
Yeah.
Not
only that, I believe in this episode, his sonic screwdriver is colored to match his outfit. I
Oh
think
my
even the
god,
sonic screwdriver changes color.
that's incredible. That's
Yeah,
so
yeah,
cool.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I wanted to ask you that, you didn't for a second think that Ruby had been replaced by that shoulder,
Of course
right?
not. Of course
Okay,
not.
okay, okay, yeah, yeah. I mean, you've just seen so many episodes of TV and movies that it's like, okay, there was a fake out.
Right. But
Okay.
yeah, like I was wanted to say before, I really want to just praise Billy Gibson. I think Ruby's such a good companion. She's got the best of what I think of as the best of companions, which is she goes off and does her own thing. She like has her own little story. She's funny. She makes pop culture references. She's like a really good access point for the audience.
Mm-hmm.
I love her facial expressions. I love the way she plays scenes. I love the way she comforts the doctor when he
Mm-hmm.
needs comfort. She's got all the strength and chutzpah of a good companion, and I think she's doing. I'll be saying when she leaves, I think she's a very good companion.
Yes, yes. And one of the things that I think is a plus for her is that she doesn't seem like so emotionally or even like physically dependent upon the doctor. Like it seems like with other companions, they're always kind of almost like lost without him. But
Yes,
she seems to like be able to hold her own and do
yeah,
what she needs to do too. So,
that's what's
you
cool
know,
about 73 yards. Like she
y-
kind of accepts that he's gone, and
yeah,
then, but again, like it shows like when the doctor touches your life, you get touched with that sort of like altruism. She still, when she's older, decides she has to take out Mad Jack.
right, right.
Yeah, right. And she's certainly not in love with the doctor. It's nothing like that. Uh,
No, no.
you know, they have uh just a great relationship. I mean, I think if she has a focus, it's figuring out the whole thing with her mother.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah. And I know like having watched the next episode that like, you know, well, I don't want to spoil anything for you, but the next episode, like they kind of take it to the next level. I think there's only what? There's only 2 more episodes left of the season? 7 and
Oh, I
8?
think there's
Or
one more. Well, there's two more after this. There's 8. There's only 8.
yeah, so there's only
The next time we
another.
report, we'll be wrapping up the season.
Wow, Jesus Christ. I just before we wrap this one up, then I just wanted to give praise for like the shoulder design because you have these like bird people in these like
Yeah,
Victorian era outfits. I thought they just looked so great. I got excited when I saw them in the commercial for this episode, and then like their eyes would kind of flicker. And then they would
yeah,
kind of crane their heads too. So I just like the combination of like the makeup effect and with a digital effect, but then also the person's acting, their physical acting. I wanted to give praise for that. And I like how they just look at people as roles to play. We've already kind of mentioned that today,
yeah,
but
yeah. It's
I
fun.
thought, yeah. One last thing that I would say, unless you want to add some other stuff, is I saw people giving a lot of praise for Rogue because they kept saying that it felt like a traditional Doctor Who episode. And then they also, people kept making that praise of saying, like, isn't it interesting how this episode that's written by Kate Herron and Briony Redman, the first non-Russell T Davies, non-Stephen Moffat episode of the season, that like this episode is potentially the most fun or the most regular Doctor Who feeling. What do you have to say about that?
It's interesting. It's funny because I kind of disagree with um that critique because to me a traditional Doctor Who episode, the majority of the action on screen is about the antagonist and dealing with the antagonist or fixing the problem, whatever the problem is. This felt like the antagonists were almost like secondary to the story of Rogue and the Doctor meeting and having like a meet cute. Like really,
Yes,
like the majority of the episode is them flirting and stuff, and then it ends
yes,
with like, the big. Like it's really the threat is not a huge big deal,
yes. I
but it's certainly
completely agree.
fun. It's certainly a very fun episode, but I think this has been a very strong season. I do.
Yes. Yeah. It's so funny because like the thumbnail that I've made for this is when Shruti Gatwa, he kind of like salutes Rogue at the very end. It's like one of the last shots. I think it is actually the last shot of this episode. And I just made a little joke because of what we've talked about before. I was like, so long, old Doctor Who fans. Like that's going to be
Oh, yeah,
the
right.
thumbnail for this. I think that Doctor Who in particular, just because of the history that it has, I think that it can survive without the sort of established audience. Like I think that like just like the Doctor itself, Doctor Who can kind of become this new thing and survive in this kind of form. Whereas I think a lot of people were stuck on I mean I saw someone tweet something like they were like the most persecuted person of all Doctor Who fans, and they were like stone serious, you know. And I understand. I understand if you grew up watching the show and you were like watching it with like Tom Baker and stuff, and then you watch this, you're like, okay, they've clearly like put their agenda into this, right? But I think that the nature of the Doctor himself and the fact that he changes, and it's just so widely acknowledged that he changes into a different character,
Right.
allows it to be its own thing and have this kind of vibe.
No, I completely agree with you. I think I
Yeah.
said this way back when we recorded on Space Babies.
Yeah.
I think that you kind of have to. It's cool. Look, fans love continuity and they love gathering, and that's part of fandom is gathering information, right? And being sort of like having tons of trivia in your brain. But I think you have to, if you want to continue to enjoy Doctor Who, you kind of have to just let it go. Like it keeps renewing itself. That's literally what it is. So I do think that it's built into the show that it can go forever.
Yes.
They say the ratings aren't good, and they haven't been good for I think since the Matt Smith era. To be honest with you, but I think in the UK there's probably fatigue. They're probably it was it's been on since 2004 or whatever.
Wow,
like,
20 years.
I don't want it to go away, but it went away before, you know what I mean? Like, and then it came back and look how big it was. Like, I can understand the fatigue. I just, it's so funny as we're talking about this, and I know you've been reviewing this on your channel. I'm just thinking about the Acolyte, and boy, just do new things. Just go ahead and do new things, man.
Yeah.
If they really Star Wars to fucking live.
Yeah, I mean, when did they start? When did The Force Awakens come out?
2015.
2015. Okay, so 9 years. So essentially half the time of New Who. And I have to say that, like, I kind of fucking want Star Wars to go away right now, too. Like, I have Star Wars fatigue,
I've been watching The Acolyte really like it's homework.
Yeah, yes.
Which is like not from like being a little kid and like any little Star Wars thing I cherish. Now I'm like, oh, I gotta watch The Acolyte. Oh no.
Right.
How horrible is that?
No, that is unfortunately what this has become. When it's like our stuff that we love that at least originally was through excitement and creativity. Like someone had this idea. I mean, essentially it is just content to make people watch a streaming service.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's a whole nother thing. And Brian and I actually talk about it in our review of Acolyte episode 3. By the time this video goes up, that'll be on our channel too. So you guys can go check that out. You can Brian talking about it. One other last thing. I know that Mike watches videos on my PR Marsh author Facebook page. Probably should have some like writing on it too if it's an author Facebook page. But anyway, Facebook Live has done this like lame ass thing where you essentially have to have 100 followers to post live videos. So if you guys want to go ahead and follow PR Marsh author on Facebook, that would be great because then I could just start popping these live again. Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about with these 2 episodes?
Let me look at my copious notes.
Yeah, you're good at that, man. You're good at that.
Let's see. Just so people don't think that we, discounted the racism in the last episode. There's a point where one of the people says to the doctor, you're the box is bigger on the inside. That sounds like voodoo, which is real fucking racist.
I forgot about that. That's funny. Yeah.
Very racist. when I first watched Doctor Who, I binged it, so I got used to that binging. But since that was over 10 years ago, I've gotten used to what the Doctor is now, which is he comes or she comes, and it's Doctor Who time, and it's exciting, and you talk about it, and then it stops for a little while, and then the next season comes whenever it comes, and I kind of love that. I love that, like, there's Doctor Who time. And so this season only has 8 episodes, but I feel like it's been very tight and strong. So
Yeah.
I've been loving this season. This might be one of my favorite, like, first seasons of a Doctor.
Yes, yes. I mean, you just a couple of minutes ago said how like watching The Acolyte can feel like homework, and I think that with Doctor Who, with the longer seasons and with sort of more generic episodes, I'm not gonna say it feels like homework, but it just kind of feels like, okay, we just gotta get through this one so we can get to the interesting main bad guy episodes, right? But this, it's like there is no sort of like filler episode. Like every episode is like an event, different style, you know. So everything, it's like every episode every week has been like, oh, we got to talk about this, we got to talk about Dot and Bubble and racism, oh, we got to talk about Rogue and how the Doctor kisses a man, and it's Bridgerton, right? Like, so every episode is an event, you know. So I've been enjoying talking about this with you. You guys should definitely go check out Pop Culture Man Children, because Mike is just an excellent host. He really brings a lot to any discussion. So go check out his channel, Pop Culture Man Children. I don't have a go bye-bye thing like you do on your channel. So I will just awkwardly say goodbye to everybody, and we will see you guys next time.